Good day, we are the Group 11. I'm Jhoanna Bunag.
I am Eunice Calingasan, and today we will report about the structure of scientific revolutions by Thomas Kuhn.
The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. In the Structure of Scientific Revolutions, Thomas Kuhn presents a revolutionary approach to how science functions and progresses. Against the normal perception of science as a linear accumulation of knowledge, Kuhn attempts to view science as progressing in leaps from one paradigm to the next. He argued that scientific research and thought are defined by paradigms, or conceptual worldviews, consisting of formal theories, classic experiments, and trusted methods. A paradigm is a distinct set of concepts or thought patterns, including theories, research methods, postulates, and standards for legitimate contributions to a field. Born in 1922, Kuhn began his career as a physicist before turning to the history of science. He was interested in how scientists approach their daily work and in thinking about the question of how science develops over time. He is one of the most influential philosophers of science of the 20th century. Kuhn's contribution to science philosophy signified not just a break with some important positivist beliefs, but also the beginning of a new style of scientific philosophy that pushed it closer to science history.
Thomas Kuhn saw sciences progressing in two alternating phases. One he called normal and the other he called extraordinary or revolutionary. Scientific development is traditionally thought of as simply moving faster when a discovery is made, like the discovery of bacteria, or the realization that the Earth revolves around the Sun, not the other way around. But for Kuhn, the normal and extraordinary phases of science aren't just different speeds of discovery, but fundamentally different approach to scientific work. Normal sciences progresses under paradigms, but when anomalies appear, extraordinary science can lead to a paradigm shift that changes the fundamental underlying assumptions, norms, and rules of scientific activity. A scientific community cannot practice its trade without some set of received beliefs. These beliefs form the foundation of the educational initiation that prepares and licenses the students for professional practice. The nature of the rigorous and rigid preparation helps ensure that the received beliefs are firmly fixed in the student's mind. Scientists take great pains to defend the assumption that scientists know what the world is like. To this end, normal science will often suppress novelties which undermine its foundations. Research is therefore not about discovering the unknown, but rather a strenuous and devoted attempt to force the nature into the conceptual boxes supplied by professional education. Starting with the pre-paradigmatic stage. Before a scientific discipline develops, there is normally a long period of somewhat imperfect, directionless research into a given subject matter, for example, the physical world. There are various competing schools, each of which has a fundamentally different conception of what the basic problems of the discipline are, and what criteria should be used to evaluate theories about that subject matter. A shift in professional commitments to shared assumptions take place when an anomaly undermines the basic beliefs of the current scientific practice. These shifts are what Kuhn described as scientific revolutions, or what he said the tradition-shattering complements to the tradition-bound activity of normal science. New assumptions or paradigms require the reconstruction of prior assumptions and the reevaluation of prior facts. This is usually time-consuming and difficult, and it is also strongly resisted by the established community. Next is the route to normal science. Out of the many competing schools that cluttered the scientific landscape during a discipline's pre-paradigmatic period, one may emerge that subsequently dominates the discipline. The practitioners of the scientific discipline rally around a school that proved itself able to solve many of the problems it possesses for itself, and that holds great promise for future research. There is typically a particular outstanding achievement that causes the discipline to rally around the approach of one school. Kuhn calls such an achievement a paradigm. But let us first know how are paradigms created and how do scientific revolutions take place. Inquiry begins with a random collection of mere facts, although often a body of beliefs is already implicit in the collection. During these early stages of inquiry, different researchers confronting the same phenomena describe and interpret them in different ways. In time, these descriptions and interpretations entirely disappear. A pre-paradigmatic school appears. Such a school often emphasizes a special part of the collection of facts. Often these schools compete for preeminence. From the competition of these pre-paradigmatic schools, one paradigm emerges. To be accepted as a paradigm, a theory must seem better than its competitors, but it need not and in fact never does explain all the facts with which it can be confronted, thus making research possible. As a paradigm grows in strength and in number of advocates, the other pre-paradigmatic schools or the previous paradigm fade. There are two different senses of paradigm, the exemplar and disciplinary matrix. Normal science means research firmly based upon one or more scientific achievements, achievements that some particular scientific community acknowledges for a time as supplying the foundation for its further practice. These achievements must be sufficiently unprecedented to attract an enduring group of adherents away from the competing modes of scientific activity, and sufficiently open-ended to leave all sorts of problems for the redefined group of practitioners and their students to resolve. These achievements can be called paradigms. Students study these paradigms in order to become members of the particular scientific community in which they will later practice. Because the student largely learns from and is mentored by researchers who learn the basis of their field from the same concrete models, there is seldom disagreement over fundamentals. Men whose research is based on shared paradigms are committed to the same rules and standards for scientific practice. A shared commitment to a paradigm ensures that its practitioners engage in the paradigmatic observation that its own paradigm can do most to explain. Paradigms help scientific communities to bound their discipline in that they help the scientists to create avenues of inquiry, formulate questions, select method with which to examine questions, define areas of relevance, and establish or create meaning. A paradigm is essential to scientific inquiry, as what Kuhn said, no natural history can be interpreted in the absence of at least some implicit body of intertwined theoretical and methodological belief that permits selection, evaluation, and criticism. Normal science is characterized by anonymous assent by the members of scientific discipline to a particular paradigm. In the structure of scientific revolutions, Kuhn uses the term paradigm to refer to two very different kinds of things. First is the paradigms as exemplars. Thomas Kuhn at first uses the term paradigm to refer to the particular concrete achievement that defines by example the course of all subsequent research in a scientific discipline. In his 1969 postscript to Structure of Scientific Revolutions, Kuhn refers to an achievement of this sort as an exemplar. Among the numerous examples of paradigms, Kuhn gives are Newton's mechanics and theory of gravitation, Franklin's theory of electricity, and Copernicus' treatise on his heliocentric theory of the solar system. These works outlined a unified and comprehensive approach to a wide-ranging set of problems in their respective disciplines. As such, they were definitive in those disciplines. The problems, methods, theoretical principles, metaphysical assumptions, concept, and evaluative standards that appear in such works constitute a set of examples after which all subsequent research was patterned. Note, however, that Kuhn's use of the term paradigm is somewhat inconsistent. For example, sometimes he will refer to a particular parts of a concrete scientific achievement as paradigms. Next is the paradigm as disciplinary matrices. Later in the structure of scientific revolutions, Kuhn begins to use the term paradigm to refer not only to the concrete scientific achievements as described, but to the entire cluster of problems, methods, theoretical principles, metaphysical assumptions, concepts, and evaluative standards that are present to some degree or other in an exemplar. For example, the concrete, definitive scientific achievement. In his 1969 postscript to SSR, Kuhn refers to such a cluster as a disciplinary matrix. A disciplinary matrix is an entire theoretical, methodological, and evaluative framework within which scientists conduct their research. This framework constitutes the basic assumptions of the discipline about how research in that discipline should be conducted, as well as what constitutes a good scientific explanation. According to Kuhn, the sense of paradigm as disciplinary matrix is less fundamental than the sense of paradigm as an exemplar. The reason for this is that the exemplar essentially defines by example the elements in the framework that constitutes the disciplinary matrix.
The nature of normal science. Now that we know what a paradigm is and how it develops, Kuhn brings us to the next level, how normal science works. Normal science then contributes to the promise of the paradigm being successful by employing scientists in figuring out how the paradigm can be used to predict more natural phenomena, that is by making more connections between the facts scientists already have and the paradigm. The other way in which normal science contributes to the success of the paradigm is by giving the paradigm a better definition. Normal science is then just a way to support a paradigm and help fit nature into conceptual boxes, which will then be used as an educational tool to add to the validity of the paradigm. Number 1. The scientific community. According to Kuhn, a scientific discipline is defined socially. It is a particular scientific community united by education, professional interaction and communication, as well as similar interests in problems of a certain sort and acceptance of a particular range of possible solutions to such problems. The scientific community, like other communities, defines what is required for membership in the group. A scientific community is made up of people who work in a certain field of science. Members of a scientific community consider themselves and are seen by others as the persons who are solely responsible for achieving a set of common goals, including the training of their successors. Number 2. The role of exemplars. Exemplars are solutions to problems that serve as the basis for generalization and development. The goal of studying an exemplar during one's scientific education is to learn to see new problems as similar to the exemplar and to apply the principles applicable to the exemplar to the new problems. A beginning scientist learns to abstract from the many features of a problem to determine which features must be known to derive a solution within the theoretical framework of the exemplar. You can't learn a theory by merely memorizing mathematical formulas and definitions. You must also learn to apply these formulas and definitions properly to solve the standard problems. This means that learning a theory involves acquiring a new way of seeing, acquiring the ability to group problems according to the theoretical principles that are relevant to those problems. The similarity groupings of the mature scientist distinguish her from the scientific neophyte. And number 3, normal science as puzzle solving. According to Kuhn, once a paradigm has been accepted by a scientific community, subsequent research consists of applying the shared methods of the disciplinary matrix to solve the types of problems defined by the exemplar. Since the type of solution that must be found is well defined and the paradigm guarantees that such a solution exists, Kuhn characterizes scientific research during normal or paradigmatic science as puzzle solving. Doing research is essentially like solving a puzzle. Puzzles have rules. Puzzles generally have predetermined solutions. Instead of viewing the world as an object to be discovered, Kuhn says that normal science should be regarded as a complicated, infinitely complex game where we are asked to solve riddles by testing one hypothesis at a time. The emergence of anomaly and crisis. Though the paradigm guarantees that a solution exists for every problem that it possesses, it occasionally happens that a solution is not found. If the problem continues to persist after repeated attempts to solve it within the framework defined by the paradigm, scientists may become acutely distressed and a sense of crisis may develop within the scientific community. This sense of desperation may lead some scientists to question some of the fundamental assumptions of the disciplinary matrix. Typically, competing groups will develop strategies for solving the problem, which at this point has become an anomaly that congeal into differing conceptual schools of thought, much like the competing schools that characterize pre-paradigmatic science. The fundamental assumptions of the paradigm will become subject to widespread doubt, and there may be general agreement that a replacement must be found. Though often many scientists continue to persist in their view that the old paradigm will eventually produce a solution to the apparent anomaly. A scientific crisis occurs when people lose confidence in the paradigm's ability to answer especially troubling questions known as anomalies. Anomalies arise throughout the progress of science, according to Kuhn. He also claims that they are frequently ignored, dismissed, or rejected. Not only that, but scientists continue to discover new data and propose radical new theories on a regular basis. As a result, paradigm shifts are possible. According to Kuhn, there are two possible outcomes. For instance, paradigms might shift as a result of new discoveries. Second, paradigms can shift when new facts or new theories emerge. An anomaly is a problem that resists normal practice under the existing paradigm and occurs unexpectedly. A shift in the researcher's perspective is part of the adjustment process. Kuhn points out that when a new fact is absorbed, not only is a theory altered, but the assimilation is incomplete until the scientist learns to perceive nature in a better perspective. The paradigm changes that result from the invention of new theories brought about by the failure of existing theory to solve the problems defined by the theory. This failure is acknowledged as a crisis by the scientific community. Crisis is where the paradigm shift occurs. Anomalies become serious and a crisis emerges when they challenge the paradigm's underlying assumptions and attempts to remove them continually fail. If the anomalies can be resolved, the crisis is over and normal science resumes. If not, there is a scientific revolution which involves a change of paradigm. The birth and assimilation of a new paradigm. Eventually, one of the competing approaches for solving the anomaly will produce a solution that, because of its generality and promise for future research, gains a large and loyal following in the scientific community. This solution comes to be regarded by its proponents as a concrete, definitive scientific achievement that defines by examples how research in that discipline should subsequently be conducted. In short, this solution plays the role of an exemplar for the group. Thus, a new paradigm is born. Not all members of the scientific community immediately rally to the new paradigm, however. Some resist adopting the new problems, methods, theoretical principles, metaphysical assumptions, concepts, and evaluative standards implicit in the solution, confident in their belief that a solution to the anomaly will eventually emerge that preserves the theoretical, methodological, and evaluative framework of the old paradigm. Eventually, however, most scientists are persuaded by the new paradigm's growing success to switch their loyalties to the new paradigm. Those who do not may find themselves ignored by members of the scientific community or even forced out of that community's power structure. Those who hold out eventually die. The transition to the new paradigm is complete. A new paradigm will be established, but not as a result of any logically compelling justification. The new paradigm better explains the observations and offers a model that is closer to the objective external reality. Revolutions aren't considered paradigm changes. Instead, they're viewed as additions to a larger and mostly coherent body of scientific knowledge. Finally, in the structure of scientific revolutions, Kuhn describes the history of science as a progression from one paradigm to the next. When a certain paradigm is enough to account for the world as it is perceived, normal science can function, elaborating knowledge within the paradigm. But when a paradigm enters a crisis, like in a meeting phenomenon, it cannot account for of arriving at internal contradictions. The search for a new paradigm is on. What happens eventually, according to Kuhn, is that the paradigmatic crisis leads to a scientific revolution which marks a shift, even rupture, from the pre-existing paradigm. This means that all prior knowledge has to be reintegrated into the concepts and structures of the new paradigm. When this is complete, science can once again function as normal science until the next paradigm crisis and scientific revolution. Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions is considered to mark the postmodern turn in the philosophy of science, making human knowledge a relative field of belief as much as it is of objective knowledge.